everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to check out a game that I was really excited to get my hands on, and that is Sail to India by Alderac Entertainment Group. Now this is a very small game. It consists of only a few cards. Really, there's 12 in a line and a 13th for the starting point, and then some cards for the individual players. So I guess you could call it a micro game, although it does include a number of counters and a couple of extra cards for managing technology. But all in all, it's very small footprint. It fits in this little box, and if you want, it could fit in a little drawstring bag. I guess it's a micro game, but it's a micro game that offers a decent amount of strategy inside that box. You have lots of choices to make and have a minimal number of components to make them with. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what comes inside of this box? We'll see how the game plays, and we'll come back here at the end and I'll give you my opinions on Sail to India. So here you can see the components for Sail to India. Now this is a relatively small game. Some might even call it a micro game. I think it's a little bit bigger than that, but it's a small game that has kind of a Euro-y feel to it. But you're trying to navigate from Lisboa to India, which is this last card that kind of falls off of the scope of my camera here. Unfortunately, I can't go any more wide than this with my shot, but each of these areas represents a port between Lisboa and India. And right now the first three are available. Now each player is going to start the game with some tracks here. They're going to have a track to keep track of their wealth. Right now this player has 2. They're going to have a track to keep track of their ship speed, which is 1 right now, but they can increase it throughout the game to 2 or 3. They're going to have 3 scientists, which will allow them to build technologies that are out here on the board. And they're going to have a victory point track. Right now they have 0 VP. In addition, each player is going to start with 1 cube on Lisboa. This cube will be used for many different things. Cubes will be used to gain more wealth, to score your VP. They'll also be used to get trade goods, to act as ships to discover new areas, or to build out onto these various buildings out here to give you victory points and benefits throughout the game. On your turn, you get 2 actions, and all of these actions are actually outlined on one of these little cards here. They tell you what all of the possible actions are, and you can use your actions and repeat them if you would like in order to do the same action twice. The first thing you may do is you may buy a new marker. It's called employing a marker. And if you would like to employ a marker, you can simply pay 1 of your wealth by sliding down your wealth cube 1 and buy a new marker to place onto Lisboa. This will be important because these can be converted into ships, which can then be converted into buildings or trade goods. They're going to allow you to get victory points and to get more money throughout the game. Instead of spending wealth to get victory points, you may go ahead and move ships. Any cubes that are on Lisboa can potentially be ships. Your movement starts out at 1, but it can be increased through an action by paying 2 gold to 2 or 4 more gold to 3. And that'll be another option that we go through later. But when you move them, you may move all of your ships up to your movement. So in this case, 1. If I would like, I may move my ship over to this first card because I have a movement of 1. I place it down below the card to show that it's a ship. It's in this C area. If I had a movement of 2, I could have, of course, moved over further. But now that I'm in this area down here, I have the choice. I can convert my guy into trade goods if I would like. So I could move this guy up here and he can become a trade good of this type right here. It happens to be sugar. Or I can move him onto the jewels and he could become a jewels trade good. If in the future I moved my ship all the way to one of the undiscovered towns, I would then flip that town over, discovering it and earning myself a victory point. However, there's a conundrum here. Anytime I earn a victory point, I must have a cube to place onto my victory point track, at least up until 5 victory points. And that cube has to come from Lisboa. I currently don't have one, but what I can do is that anytime I can return any number of ships I want or any number of cubes I want from this area back to Lisboa, and then use those cubes as a victory point marker. Now, you'll see that this is good up until I get 5 victory points, but if I need more victory points, if I earn a 6th, I'm going to need another cube from Lisboa. So you'll have to manage your cubes between out here in Lisboa, traveling to get resource goods, discovering new parts of the coastal towns on the way to India, and building buildings, maintaining your wealth. So there's a lot of reasons you may need cubes, but discovering a new coastal town will earn you a victory point from which you'll have to move a cube to Lisboa onto your victory point track in order to keep track of. So, moving ships will allow you to traverse and get goods. Now, what else can you do? You can sell goods. Selling goods on your turn is an action that you can use, one of your 2. And when you sell goods, you're simply returning the goods from coastal towns back to Lisboa. This is going to earn you wealth, and these are all outlined on these cards right here. For example, if I were to return 1 type of good, I would get 1 wealth. So if I were to return this gem, I'd get 1 wealth. And I would mark that by moving up on my wealth track. However, the more different types of goods I can return by having more ships out here collecting trade goods, well, they won't be ships anymore, they'll be trade goods, but the more I get, the more reward I'll get. So if I return 2 types of goods, I will get 2 wealth, and I'll get 2 victory points. 0 victory points. 2 wealth and 0 victory points. But as soon as I get to 3 different types of goods, I get 3 wealth and 1 victory point. Moving all of those cubes that I happen to have out on the different trade goods back to the main supply, and then I would get 3 wealth and 1 victory point by moving a cube from Lisboa over to my victory point track. And that's how you're going to accumulate wealth and victory points. Now, what do you need all of this stuff for? Well, you may build buildings. Now, building buildings doesn't cost anything, but if you happen to have a cube out on an area, either as a ship or as a trade good, you can spend 2 of your wealth in order to buy one of these buildings. So, I can convert either a good or a ship into a building. Some of these buildings are markets, like these 3 here. This one is a gem market, a gold market, or we happen to have a spice market right here. When you pay your 2 gold to convert either a trade good or a ship into one of these different buildings, this will become a market that you can automatically sell every time you sell goods. So I would be able to take goods and send them back, always including a gold. But I must have at least 1 other good to trade in with it. I won't lose this gold, and I'll have it the next time that I decide to trade in goods, and I'll get, of course, more benefit in the terms of wealth and victory points for doing so. You can acquire technology, and this is the main use for your wealth. There are all of these different technologies out here, but you can only get 3 per game because you only get 3 scientists. You can buy any of these technologies with your action by spending the appropriate amount of wealth, and some of them will just make next level technologies cheaper, where some of them will give you different benefits. Like, for example, the printing press says when you acquire a technology, you gain a victory point. So your second and third, including this one, so your first, second, and thirds will give you a victory point apiece. You have geography. You may return your markers on land, buildings, and all other types to the sea. If you do so, the markers return to being ships. So you can actually pull stuff back off of cards and make them into ships. And there are a ton of different things that you can do. For example, the factory. When you sell trade goods, gain 1 additional wealth every time that you sell. Or the guild. At the end of the game, gain 2 additional VP for each of the marketplaces you own. So if you build these marketplaces, you can get additional things. Now, there are other types of buildings, and all of these buildings happen to be worth victory points, so if you build any of the markets, they're worth a VP at the end of the game. If you build strongholds, they're worth 1 VP at the end of the game, but they also give you a special ability. When you move ships, you may always jump your ships to one of your strongholds if you happen to have it built. And this is before you take your movement. So building these strongholds can be a good way to advance, discovering more coastal towns, which will, of course, give you victory points. If you build a church, it doesn't have a special ability, but it's worth 2 victory points at the end of the game, and that is all of the different types of buildings that are available out on the board. So, we've covered employing markers and moving ships, buying and selling trade goods, or getting trade goods and selling them. We've got building buildings and acquiring technologies, but the last thing you can do is that you can go ahead and increase your ship speed by paying 2 or 4 wealth. Now, you have to pay 2 and then subsequently 4 in order to increase it, but this will allow you to move your ships further in order to get more coastal towns discovered and hopefully get you some more victory points. So as you might have gathered, there is an awful lot going in here. Trying to figure out how to best use your cubes. Do you really need to take that extra wealth by removing a cube from Lisboa? Are you going to have a cube available to get the victory points that you earn? And if not, why are you doing it? Do you want to use a lot of your cubes for trade goods, or do you want to explore further down? Are you going to invest heavily in buildings or technology? It's all kind of this balancing act between these minimal amount of cubes that you have. You'll note that you start the game with 5, and that there are 8 more you can get throughout the game, but that is the limit of your cubes. This game will end when one of 2 things happens. Either 2 of the players will have placed all of their cubes, there are none left in the supply, or you'll get all the way to India, and the player who discovers this last card here by flipping it over will actually earn 2 victory points. That is discovering India. It's worth 1 for the flipping of the coastal town and 1 extra for discovering India. Basically, after that, the game is going to end. The player who triggered it will finish his turn, and everyone else will get 1 extra final turn. And then you're going to go and see who has the most victory points. Of course, by victory points they've earned throughout the game. victory points from all of their buildings, and essentially victory points from technologies that provide victory points at the end of the game, and whoever has the most will win. If there happens to be a tie, there are several tiebreakers. I believe they go to whoever discovered India, then whoever happened to have the most wealth left over, and then whoever happens to have scored the most victory points on their victory point tracker throughout the game. But no matter what, at that point, you should hopefully have a winner, and that player will be the winner of Sail to India. Well, there you have it. That is Sail to India. Now, I must admit, when I got it to the table, of course, I was very excited to play this game. And maybe initially when I played through, I wasn't terribly enthralled. Because I guess I go into every game hoping that I'm going to love it because it's going to be the greatest thing ever and it's going to have a million options, and perhaps I'm too picky, and I will admit to that readily, sorry. But when I sat down and thought about it more, and I thought about the footprint of this game and what they've done with what's inside of this tiny little box that I'm going to throw on the floor, this box right here, it started to grow on me a little bit. The simplicity of the design, the fact that we've got these just 13 cards in a row and some cubes, and each player has a couple of cards in their own tableau, and the fact that there are so many choices to be made with just those few components, the more I thought about it, the more it grew on me, and the more I decided that I really do enjoy this game quite a bit. It's a game that I can travel with and get a good amount of strategy without having to lug around a huge box, set up an entirely huge game with tons of miniature pieces and you know, fiddliness and all this stuff. It's a great fix for that lunchtime type position when you're looking for something you can play quickly with a good amount of strategy, get it to the table, teach people, pick it up, and play it repeatedly even over the same small period of time. So what I'm saying is that don't judge this game based on your overall scope of games. Look at it the way that it should be looked at in terms of its footprint and the accessibility and option and variety that it offers for that small footprint. And if you do so, I think you're going to realize that this is an excellent game. Really quite excellent, an amazing design, and one that I hope more games take hints from. I'm looking for smaller games that I can pull out with tons of choices, and I'd love to have a whole supply of those that I can, you know, travel with and have for new gamers or strategic gamers who necessarily don't have a large area that they can play in. So lots of strategy in this one, done with a very few amount of components. I definitely suggest checking it out, despite the initial reservations I had when I first played it. Subsequent plays have shown me that there's more to this game than I thought. Check it out. That's Sail to India by Alderac Entertainment Group.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at